Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started again? And anyone else who needs to might come in a few minutes later, they'll join up. So like I was saying, we're going to be going over asset management today. This will be a primer for next week's asset management lifecycle, KKE. So let's go ahead and move on through the slides here. So I'll move quickly through these. Just want to let everyone know that Backyard Boot Camp is back on for 2015. We are currently in Toronto. It's actually where Ron is right now. Going ahead and giving a boot camp training. This is a classroom style training. It is intended for new users. So if you've got a new or a new member of your team, and you have the KACE appliances and need to get them up to speed, you can go ahead and do that. Or if maybe you've had the appliance for a while and you want to just get a little refresher on your skills, you can go ahead and come out to boot camp, go over K1, we go over K2. It's 4 full days of training. It's a lot of fun. It's a small group, so you have ample time to ask questions with the trainer, and we bring our own equipment so you can break our appliances, not yours. All right. So you can head out to KACEbootcamp.com for any of the information. We'll be in Chicago in a few weeks, and then we'll be back in Austin a few weeks after that. Right? So you can go check out the schedule. We've got plenty more scheduled throughout the summer. All right, so a couple upcoming KKEs that we have here. So this week we have some K2 computer naming and then an open forum again on Thursday. So if you have any questions, please feel free to hang in there. We've got asset management lifecycle, which will be like a second part to today's session. And then looking forward to this one, we have a K1000 6.3 SNMP agentless primer so that you can learn a little bit more about mapping the information between maybe those printers and switches, and instead of doing a full walk and trying to get through all that information, going ahead and mapping that correctly in the K1. So we're going to be bringing our engineering team in again and talking about that. And then we got some more. We've got some more open forums, and then we'll be bringing back our KACE at EDU, our education theme week, towards the end of the month. All right, so we've got some resources here. We've got support.software.dell.com. This is where you'll fill out any of your service tickets, go through the knowledge base. It's also going to be the new home for our KKE videos. If you head out there now and go either to the K1000 or K2000 subpages, you'll see a link for video tutorials, and those that's where our archive is now. You'll also be able to find them through searches. So if whatever you're searching for, it meets the criteria of our video, you'll be able to bring that up as well. We have case.com/KKE. Obviously, the new site there to go out and register. And for those who were just popping back in after we emailed back out, we had some technical difficulties that we had to attend to. All right. We have some other resources here, case.com/newsletter. And that's about a monthly or bi-monthly newsletter we send out from the training team. And itninja.com and so on. Right. So thank you. Just kind of keep an eye on those resources here. Case.uservoice.com. If you have any things that you'd like to see in the products themselves, feel free to get out there and make your voice heard and so on. Okay. Mike, this I know Mike's assuming a question here. Mike, this is gonna be the first primer. We're just we had some technical difficulties. We're just starting back up again here now. So, all right. So we've got our agenda for today. So we'll be talking about some inventory information. We'll be going through and talking about the differences between inventory and the assets in the K1000. We'll be talking about all the different asset types as well, and what the different types of fields that we can do are. We're talking about the relationships between those as well. If we have any, oh, darn it. Hold on a second, folks. I sent host to the wrong person. Mike, sorry about this, but could you go ahead and right-click on my name and send host to me?
Mike?
Thank you very much.
How's it going, Mike?
Good. You were in my PC this morning?
That's right. Did you send me an email?
All right. So sorry, folks. We're having some technical issues here with the WebEx system, so we're going to get it all straightened out. All right. So what we're talking about relationships. And then we'll be talking about importing of assets. So, if you are just starting out doing your asset management and you don't feel like typing in everything by hand, you can import, and we'll kind of talk to you about that a little bit. And then we'll open it up for some Q&A. So as with everything that we do in here in KKE, we like to let everyone know the newest versions of the appliances, and that anything that you see will be upon these versions. So we have the K1000 6.3, which was released a little bit earlier. We did just release an updated agent bundle, 6.3.314. Highly recommend heading out and getting that. You should be able to go, if you're already on 6.3, it is most likely advertised to your appliance already. So you can head out to settings, provisioning, update agents, and then you can find it there. You can be able to apply it, advertise it to your appliance. Then you can make sure to enable the update agent feature so that you can start pushing out those no agents. K1000 was updated recently, 3.7.1, which is a service pack, and there also is a hotfix on top of that. The hotfix brings it up to 3.7.116.629, and that does bring 10.10 Yosemite support, so that you can build net boots with that to the K2000, and then the accompanying RSA version there, and then K1000 Go app for iOS and Android. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between inventory and assets, right? And this is a very good thing here, right? Dynamic data versus static data. So let's get a little bit more information here. All right, so the inventory, right, which is dynamic, right? And inventory is being pulled by the agent, or if you're on 6.0 plus, right, in most of the different versions, we have the agentless capabilities, which depending on the OS and the protocol you are using to run the agentless call is in some ways on parity for the inventory information that we are pulling from the device. All right. And we're going to be pulling information that the machine knows about itself. All right? Things like the IP address, the MAC address, the serial number of the machine, what operating system, and what's the architecture of that operating system. Right, all the different things. We're going to be doing WMI calls against the machine and pulling all sorts of different hardware level. All right, we're even going to use that information and go get your Dell warranty status and bring that in live. All right, and this is already being reported to the K1. All right. Now, it's going to be, if it's on an agent, right, you're going to be using, over on your communication settings under provisioning, you're going to be pulling the agent information every so hours, right, so many hours, depending on the total number of agents you have. And there's also a separate agentless inventory interval that you can define, also depending on your protocol. So you can bring in all this information every so often. Updating itself, right? So if you add extra RAM to a machine, right, the K1's going to report, hey, now you've got new RAM, right? And we'll see the new number now, right? This is dynamic information constantly being pulled in as the inventory is being created. We also have custom inventory that you'll need an agent for right now, so that you can pull in other items. Again, this is a dynamic thing, right? We're going to go check for the value of a registry key. Well, if that registry key value changes, right, the agent's going to report that information, right? So we're constantly pulling this information up into the K1000. And when we create, when we add agent or agentless to a device, we're going to automatically create a basic shell of an asset under the device asset type. Right, what used to be called computer asset type in our older versions of the appliances. So now it's called device, right? It's more inclusive of all different things, right? So just remember, inventory is a dynamic pull of information. Let's go about assets, right? And this is, I'm a former customer. Actually, you know, John's a former customer. On the line with us also is Mike. He's a former customer. We've all worked in IT, and there's plenty of things that you'd like to track. We all didn't, you know, some of us probably did it more than others, right, to different degrees, depending on the information that our organization needed, right? But I come from the education world, and every year I had to supply a complete list of information to the school for insurance purposes. So if something happened to the school, we'd be able to, you know, get, you know, proper value back, right? But knowing everything that you need about your environment can be, you know, can be daunting. But we've got this asset system inside the K1000 that can help you track all of these things, right? So what kind of things does a computer not know about itself that we would love to track, right? How about the purchase order number and the date that you purchased it and how much it cost, right? Maybe what vendor we purchased it from, right? Maybe all the different contract numbers, right? Maybe you've got different vendors that give you service contracts, right? Might come in and clean your printers or something like that. Or maybe you have software contracts with certain companies. Right? Maybe we want to track that information. Right? I'd like to track the vendor information. Who's my current sales rep? What's their phone number? What's the fax number? What's the website? Right? These are all things that computers themselves don't know about, but as well as the rest of, you know, your environment doesn't really know that. We need to put that into the K1, all right? And we can relate all of these assets together as well, so that we can create a list of departments under the asset type of department. And then we can add that to the asset type of device. And we'll give you a little show of how this actually works later on. But what we'll be doing is, you know, instead of having to create separate drop-downs for department and typing in the list or typing in the department by hand, we can pull from a nice little drop-down from one location of all the different departments. And when we tie them together, right, I will be able to go to a specific department and see all of the related assets for that particular department, so that I could report and say, all right, give me all of the computers that are in this department that match this device type. Right, so I can just, all right, give me all the computers in that department. Give me all the computers in that room. Give me all the computers in that building. Give me all the printers and computers in that building, right? We can get it all in there so we can report it right back out, all right? Fully customizable, right? We'll be talking about asset types a little bit more, and then the types of fields that you can add there, right? But fully customizable. Anything that you can think of tracking, IT or non-IT related, right? Maybe your company has different vans, right, that they own, right? When was the last time you serviced it? What's the license plate number of the van, right? What make and model is it? What year is it from, right? We can track all of that stuff in our assets. Doesn't have to be IT related, all right? This is all in the main database of the specific org. So if you do not have orgs in your K1, then it'll still be in the org1 database along with everything else, right? If you have multiple different orgs, then the assets can be they'll be separate along with all the other data along with each org itself, all right? And it is all reportable right back out from there. Okay. So let's go ahead and take another little look here just to kind of reinforce this thought here, right? We've got the inventory on the left-hand side. Again, that is dynamic. We're going to be pulling information that the machine can pull about itself, right? We've got a couple examples here, right? The operating system, the manufacturer, the model of the machine, right? What kind of chassis type is it, right? These are all things that can be pulled from a machine dynamically, pulled into the K1. On the other side, right, we've got the assets, right? This is all very manual in nature, right? But we still want to track what purchase order number I used to purchase all of these different items, right? Who is the vendor I purchased it from, right? What's the status? Right? A lot of people want to be able to keep a whole bunch of computers over in the closet there, right? But I'd like to be able to report on what computers are active, what computers are, spares, right? So we can keep all that information in assets, all right? We want to do an assign to. Another good thing about the K1, right, is that you're pulling in all of your users through LDAP, which means the K1 is aware of all of the users in your environment. Well, we can add that field, right, to an asset. And while, yes, somebody does need to go into that drop-down and select a user that you want to assign to a computer, a phone, a car, a van, a printer, a chair, a desk, whatever it is that you are assigning to them, but we're still pulling from that same list. You don't need to remember how to spell their name exactly, and we're not going to spell it wrong because it's coming from a pre-generated list. And we can do that with all of our different asset types as well, like department and so on, right? So we can relate them together, not have to type things wrong. It also makes the data consistent, right? Because if we talk about maybe addresses, right? Some people will type in road as ROAD. Some people will type RD. Some people will type RD dot, right? And when we go to report, and if I want to filter based on road, well, now I've got three different ways that we spell it, right? So if we relate them to other assets in the K1 and we get a nice little drop down, people aren't typing in, they're just selecting. Right? So again, dynamic versus manual. Right? Now this is the other thing that we wanted to discuss a little bit about this, and we've kind of discussed this a little bit. But that, these are linked together, right? So when you go into assets, you'll be able to see the asset and then the inventory object that is related to that specific asset, right? And there is information there. Now, right now, right, any item that gets agent or agentless, like I said, will be coming in as the device asset type, okay, right now. But you may want to track things a little bit differently, right? Because your normal desktop computers, right, should have different, might have different fields that we might want to track them compared to your routers, compared to your switches, compared to your tablets, compared to your printers and other devices that we might be pulling in agentlessly. Right. So right now they are linked to the device asset type, and they, by default, they are linked by their name. So the name of the computer will be linked to the name of the asset, and when you pull in inventory, it will update those items so that the chain stays the same there. Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind if you want to track some things a little bit differently right now. Right, those are the kind of the things to look into, and I'll let John add to that. If you want to add anything to that, John, I don't know what we're allowed to add to on that topic just yet.
No, I think you've got it.
Okay. All right.
Pretty covered there.
All right, good. All right, so we've just been talking high level for right now, right, getting an understanding of what all these different pieces are. So now let's get into a little bit more specifics. Before you actually get into the K1000 and start creating things, you actually want to take a little step back and start thinking about what asset types you would like to be tracking in your environment. Okay, so we have asset types versus the actual assets themselves. And we, again, we mentioned this a little bit already, but asset types might be something like devices, right? Network infrastructure, printing, mobile devices, also intangible things, right? Like licenses, software licenses. Purchase order numbers, right? The vendors that you might have. Basically, think of asset types as a high-level category, right? And then each asset type can have multiple different fields customized on them, right? And that's how you're going to do it. So think about that Excel spreadsheet that you might be using right now to track your inventory. And you might have multiple different tabs along the bottom, right, because we want to track different columns in each of our Excel spreadsheet tabs there. Right? Each tab is going to be like an asset type, right? And on each tab, we're going to have different columns. Right? We're going to do the same thing here in the K1000, right? Except now it's all relatable to all the other objects in our, K1000. All right. And as each asset type is created, you can name them, whatever the name is on the object, and then fill out any other information. We'll get a little bit more into the next slide there as to, what kinds of things we can actually add to an asset type and what are the different field types. Okay. Now, one of the things a lot of people say, well, I got a lot of things that I need to update. I just, brought in 400 new machines. Or new phones or new, switches or whatever it is, right? I don't want to go to 400 different different records and manually change them. So what you could do, right, is you could actually export those fields, right? Or if you're just starting off fresh, right, you can create the asset types and the fields that you need, right, and then import from existing data. So that you're not starting from nothing, you're starting from fresh. Now, the important thing is, right, we always talk about this, right, garbage in, garbage out, right? So you want to make sure that file looks clean, that you have the naming conventions are consistent, right? Remember going back to my road example, right? We want to make sure all those things are consistent, make sure the fields are available. You only want to ever import, we'll talk about this too more in detail, you only want to ever import one asset type at a time. Right, and then you want to make sure to update as the data changes. Right, so you have to go back in and you'll have to manually change some things as the data changes. If a computer comes from spare, goes out to active, well, somebody's got to go in and say that, or else now your reporting is not going to be up to date. Right, so we're going to house the data, we're going to organize the data for you, but we are not mind raiders. We cannot change the data for you in this case. Right, you need to do that, or you need to have somebody who's an asset manager kind of do this type of stuff. All right, so think of the asset types as the high-level categories for which we're going to be working with. All right, so now for each asset type, we can have as many fields as we like. I'm sure there's some sort of technical limit at some point, though I am not aware of it, right? But you can have as many fields as you would like. You can order them on the page so that the more important information that's easier and more relevant for you is towards the top of the page, and then anything else you'd still like to track, but not the most important, right, is down below. And then we have multiple different types of fields for each one. Right, and a lot of this is very important, especially if you're going to be doing reporting on this data. Right, for example, right, manufacturer is some simple text information, but only one company manufactures something, right? Usually not two different companies manufacture a computer, right? So we can create what's called a single select dropdown. We can actually pre-populate that single select dropdown with Dell and KACE and Quest and whoever other manufacturers that you work with in that dropdown. Right, so that when you go to that asset type, there's a big drop-down. We just select from that drop-down. Now, more importantly, right, there are other ones like purchase date, right, and we have a date asset field type, right, and when you are going through reporting, right, and if I want to parse against that date, give me all the assets purchased since or within the last 30 days. Right? If you're not using that date field, right? If you put in a text field and then typed in the date, 5-5-15, right? We're not going to be able to parse that because it's not technically a date field in our database. It's just text, right? You can look at it and parse it, in your head, but a computer can't, right? So we need to make sure it's a date field, right? There's a whole bunch of different ones, right? If you want to add up the cost, right, you want to make some custom reports that add up the cost of stuff based on the column. Right, you want to use currency. Right, you want to use currency correctly. Right. We also have other types. Right, we've got link. Right, this is nice if you want to put a web link to maybe on your vendor page. You want to put a link out to their website. Maybe on a page for a printer. Right, that has a web UI. Right? Maybe we want to put the link directly to the web UI right on the asset so that we don't have to remember what the link is. We just go to the asset and click on the link and it brings up the page for the printer. Okay. We talked about the user and the user field, right? It's pre-populating all of the users that are in your K1000. We're also getting from, we can also tie in other assets to a different asset type. So we talked about department. Right? I only have one list of departments in my whole organization. It's the same list no matter what asset type we're talking about, right? Whether it's vans, devices, phones, computers, tables, right? Whatever it is, there's only 10 different departments it can be from. Well, let's create all the different departments under the asset type of departments, and then we can put that field onto all other asset types. And again, we'll be pulling a dynamically generated list so that if later on, okay, yes, maybe we've added an 11th department, the next time you open up that drop-down list, there's that 11th department. Okay? All right, we have other, and you can add additional different drop-down types. We've got attachment, so maybe you want to add a picture of something, you want to add a file, maybe you're working with a vendor, you want to upload the contract that you have for that vendor right into the system, right, because you're always looking through your email, you can never find it, right, just throw it right into the asset itself. You can do a multi-select, so if you're looking at like a computer or something like that, I'm sorry, not a computer, like a printer, right, multi-function imaging device, right, we can put in a multi-select list of all the different trays and the options that can be purchased on that particular printer, right, and select them. All right, so you can get highly customizable. So before you actually start creating this, right, it's a good thing, go take a look, see what the options are, and then take a step back, get a big whiteboard, and start thinking and planning and working with your colleagues. What kinds of things do we want to track? What kinds of things, what kind of data on those devices do we want to track? Okay. All right, so, and this, we kind of already talked about this, right, that you might already have, right, like we were talking about department, right, and you may not normally think about them as assets, right, but because if we treat them like assets, then we can relate them to other assets, and then we can definitely see how they relate to different objects, so that, again, if I add the asset type of department to all my printers, copiers, devices, right, everything else, then I can just go take a look at the asset type of department, click on the department name, right, and then, hey, there's all the things that are assigned to that department. Furthermore, I could report, give me, everything that's asset type of department and that is also a device, right, just give me that list. We could also do some interesting things with locations. Right, and there's another type called parent, there's an asset field type called parent. And one of the things that you can do, and I've built this out if you want me to show you in my K1 here a little bit just to kind of illustrate, right, is let's say we have the state of California, and maybe your company has 2 offices, right? So for example, we've got offices in Mountain View and Santa Clara, right? And Santa Clara's got a couple different floors, and Mountain View's got a couple different floors, and each of those floors have different rooms. Well, maybe I want to see all the devices in a room. Well, maybe I want to go one step up. I want to see all the devices on the floor. Maybe I want to go one step up. I want to see all the devices in office number 1, right, in Santa Clara. Well, let's skip that. Let me see everything in Santa Clara. Okay, well, now somebody's asking me, I need to see everything in California, right? So again, we can make a parent list of locations so that, or even with departments, you can do the same thing, right? So that you can relate with parent-child relationships, right? So that I can report and view and see all the different assets that are available to me based on how I need to find that information, okay? All right, so we talked a little bit about asset importing, and this can be really good if you're just starting out. Right? You've got nothing in there, or maybe you've got a few things because you were playing around. You definitely have your device assets already because they were created by the K1 inventory when the agent or agentless checked in for that first time. All right. So what we can do is we can, for whatever data system you've got now, right, you can export into a a CSV file. If you can export to CSV, that's great. If you export it to Excel or some other way, right, let's get it into a CSV file. You want to clean up the data a little bit. Right, remember we talked about garbage in, garbage out. Right, you want to go through, make sure that naming conventions are consistent across the board. You want to go ahead and then create the asset types that you are going to be importing, and then looking at your CSV file, what are the column headings? Right? What are all the different pieces of data that we're going to want to track? Right? Make sure that we add those fields in so that when we do import, there's somewhere for that data to go. Right? And you want to, only do one asset type at a time. Right? So that all the fields will match up properly. Right? We don't want to import into multiple different places. Okay. You can and then when you do import, right, we want to make sure we have something called a PK, a primary key. And you'll see when you do an import that you'll get an option to assign column names to the asset fields, right, in your particular environment. So that, all right, name is this, and the IP you might be calling something, your spreadsheet might have phone and then the pound symbol, but inside the K1000, maybe you typed out phone number, right? So we're going to map those different items, all the fields in your spreadsheet to the fields in the K1000. And then you're going to be able to choose what's a primary key so that, let's say the name of the machine is the same in the spreadsheet as it is in the K1000. Well, we don't want to create a new asset record, right? We want to update what's already in the K1000 with the new data. And the primary key is the unique identifier that is mapped together between the two different data points. Right? So that it will only change the other stuff, right? Not the name or anything else. If you don't use the primary key that's unique, you're going to be importing and making a whole mess of things, right? So make sure you choose that primary key. When you are doing your import, you will get a kind of like a test view before you actually do the final import, so that you'll be able to kind of see, all right, well, this is what it's going to look like. Here's all the records that are going to be updated. Here's all the new records that are going to be created. If it doesn't look good, don't hit import. Go back and make sure you chose that primary key. John, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, a couple things about primary keys. It's especially important to try to choose something that's going to be unique. So if we're talking about phones, for example, consider that a phone number assigned to an actual physical phone could change, right? So you probably don't want to use the phone number. Similar with computers. although they tend to get assigned. Device assets tend to get created automatically. But at the same time, if you're importing information about those, you may not want to use a computer name. You want to try to use something that's not going to change. In the case of the phone or computer, might be a serial number, or I know phones have a special code, an ID associated with them. I can't think of the acronym right now. But you definitely want to choose something that's going to be unique and something that's not going to change. Also, when it comes to importing and you're specifying your primary key, again, you want to focus on something unique. If you don't, what you'll end up with, especially when you're trying to update records, is a lot of asset records won't be updated. So like Andrew said, review the import preview results before you actually go ahead with the import to make sure that during your sanity check there that things are going to be updated as you expect them to. So
excellent. Thank you, John. Yeah, and we can't stress enough how important it is, right, to make sure your import is good and looking nice before you click that import button, right, because it's going to be a whole lot of cleanup after the fact if it's not imported correctly. All right, so you want to always make sure, and that's again why that preview is really important. Pay attention to that preview, right? So that if the primary key wasn't correct, you're going to see a whole bunch of new records being created. Maybe that's not a good idea. Let me click back and make sure I use something a little better. Okay. All right, excellent. So that's actually all that we have for today. Again, today was just kind of a primer, getting you ready for what's coming up next week. If you're interested, I do have some things built out in my K1000, just some very basic data in there, just to kind of give you an idea of what you can do. If you have any questions, I can show you that. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the mics here. We're going to let you ask any questions that you might have related to, again, just kind of basic assets type stuff, right? Working with the asset types, working with assets themselves. And if you have any background noise, please feel free to mute yourself. If you are more inclined to ask questions in chat, please be sure to send to all panelists so that myself and John can see your question. And then, we'll go from there. You could also use the Q&A panel if that suits you. All right, so let me go ahead and open up the mics here. All right, so does anyone have any questions related to assets based on what we've talked about today?
There was one in there from Ron Z in chat. Is there a default database that it dynamically reports to? And so, honestly, go ahead, Andrew. I was going to say I need to clarify that a little bit, but
yeah, I don't know if that meant where in the K1 is it being held. I tried to kind of answer that in line with before. That it's the same database that your K1 has. Obviously, it's going to be in different tables. Right, within your K1000, and that the tables are going to match the orgs, right, that you put them in, if you have the org system set up. So if you want to go ahead, if you want to go ahead and just kind of expand, if you have any further information about that question that might help us out.
Thank you. No, I actually asked that prior to you answering that when you were going.
Okay.
Reason being was I was working with the customer that does have the Dell KACE, and they had a particularly long list of databases that we were basically going to query from, and I was just looking to see if there was like a default name. It just
Okay, yeah. As far as in the database itself, if they have a long list of databases, I'm assuming they have multiple orgs. Right. So you may have seen like org 1, org 2, org 3, up however many they had. The default org is going to be org 1, but again, if they have organizations, each one's going to be unique. But as far as the tables, the actual tables within each org number database, I'm actually bringing this up on mine. Actually, I have it down right now. You're going to see a number of asset tables. Some are going to be related to the asset types. Others are going to contain, the specific information, and they're generated on the fly. So that's one thing to be aware of whenever you're working with assets. As assets are created on a K1000, they're done so and injected into the database dynamically.
Okay.
And there's no set pattern. So if a device asset, gets updated, and then, say a location asset gets updated, it's going to be done sequentially, but the numbers don't really mean anything. So the main point there to keep in mind is that every single customer's K1000 is going to have a unique database structure for their assets. So in order to work with it, to report on it and whatnot, especially if you need to get outside of the report wizard, you basically need to create what we call an asset database map, which you actually use the wizard for.
Okay.
So you can figure out what field names actually correspond to the kind of randomly numbered columns and database entries that appear as the assets are created.
All right.
Hopefully that helps.
Yes, actually, it really does.
Okay, cool. Anybody else?
I'm getting a couple of questions here from Mike. Mike, just to address the first part of your question, these sessions are recorded, and they are going to be up on the support.software.dell.com site. They'll be under the video tutorials, so you'll be able to find the recording there. Usually we try to get them posted up before the end of the month for the previous month, right? The next question is, so you're looking for some more information about the K1000. Are you new to the K1, or did you just purchase the K1000? You can go ahead and speak up if you need.
Or maybe inherited it.
Or inherited it, right, exactly. You go ahead and continue to chat if you need to, Mike, or just speak up. Okay. So what I would recommend, a couple different things I could recommend. First thing is, if you want, I'll give you my email address, and then please feel free to shoot me your email, and we'll get you at least the recordings from your Jumpstart if it wasn't that old for the appliance that was trained there. And that might get you started depending on if the training is still relevant. I mean, if you got training 5 years ago, appliance has changed so much, right? It may not be relevant anymore. We have the KKE's videos. So if you go to support.software.dell.com, search for K1000 Systems Management Appliance, and then over on the right, you'll see a link that says Video Tutorials. There's a whole bunch of different videos that you can get access to for free right up on the site there. All right, you can view them to your heart's content. All right. Lastly, and this is something you may want to look into, those boot camps that I mentioned right at the beginning of the session, the website for that is KACEbootcamp.com, CASE with a K, obviously. And that you are the prime target that we are looking for in those types of training scenarios. So you may want to take a look and see if there's any of them coming up near you. Obviously, it is a cost to attend, but by the end of those 4 days, you will know how to use the K1 and the K2 appliances. You don't have to come for K2 day if you don't want to, if you don't have a K2, but you will know how to use the appliances absolutely after those few days, and that will get you, up and running and started as well. So those are the few avenues I would start with.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. I used, when I was a customer, I used all my Jumpstart time for K1, so I didn't have any on K2 when I saw how much there was to learn in K1. So I attended a boot camp for K2, and yeah, when I was done, I knew how to use the thing. No doubt about
Thank you. Yeah, both John and myself are former customers of the CACE world, so we've been there and done that. So we've had to deal with the training and so on. So Mike, I'm gonna send you my email address. Just send me your name and your company name, right? And I'll work with you offline on that. So we'll just kind of take that conversation offline so we don't take up too much extra time here specifically, okay? So just shoot me that information and we'll work back and forth a little bit there. All right, so I just sent you my email address. All right, no problem. All right, so does anyone else have any other questions related to assets? Anything they'd like to see or anything else they'd like to go with? I mean, not seeing any questions here. Let me check Q&A. Don't see anything in Q&A.
And one thing I would stress.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, if you guys don't have any questions, I was going to say one thing I can't stress enough out of everything that Andrew said was to really plan and map out your asset types and the relationships. That the way information is going to need to be put in. So for each asset type, what information are you going to need in there? You might even consider it initially versus long-term. You can always add things later.
Yep.
But you want to make sure that you have your major framework laid out first so you don't deal with a flat approach because you're in a hurry to get everything in there and then you find out later, oh man, yeah, nothing's related. I didn't really tie anything. I didn't tie my devices to my locations, and I didn't tie this stuff to the departments, and now it's all just sitting on the same level, and now I need to report on it. Oh no. Because ultimately, that's where assets become extremely powerful for any organization is when it comes to actually reporting on it. So you can share that information with the other departments as they ask for it, and it's not a nightmare for you anymore. If you take the time up front to map out everything,
once you get settled in, and
it'll save you a lot of headaches down the line. So.
Yeah, one of the other things along with that is just because the information might not be important to you doesn't mean it's not important to somebody else who also is using the CACE appliance there. So, bring the other stakeholders in, right? Anyone who has any stake in your organization to how information is being tracked, right? You ask your finance people, right? Hey, what kind of information do you normally need from me? What information have I not been able to provide to you that you would like, right? What kind of stuff would you like to track, right? Let's get that built out. Again, you do that up front, you now have your framework in place before you actually start bringing in from data in. Get everyone to the table, get a big whiteboard, get some lunch, and just, spend some time kind of talking it out. All right. Okay, any other questions? Any other?
Is there anything that was covered that isn't clear at this point? I know I'm a seeing is believing type person, so a lot of times hearing about a concept doesn't really help until I've actually seen an example of it. So,
if you guys are interested, I can show you the assets that I have, or up to you guys though. All right, so let's go take a look. I'll share out my my web browser here. John, just give me a shout once you see it.
it's up.
All right, so I've got my K1 again. I'm on 6.3, most current release of that, right? And I'm already in the assets module, and you can see here now by default, and my names are a little bit funny compared to yours, but you can see all of your device assets. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got the devices coming in based on the inventory that's being done, right? So these are all machines I have agents running on in my environment.
One thing to call out real quick there, and you guys may see this from time to time, there's one record in there where there's not two. And you're probably going to talk about that right now, Andrew, but I just want to call that out. If you ever end up in a situation where a device was deleted or an asset was deleted, you only see one instance in there for your devices like that.
Right. So you can see to the right of my device, right, in brackets, you see another link here. And what that actually is that's a link to the associated inventory object, right, in the appliance. So what that means, you can see my case test 01, means that at some point I had an agent on a machine called case test 01, right, or I created an asset manually, right, and had no link to something. Right. Either way, right, in the first scenario, right, I deleted the object, so if I headed up to inventory, you're not going to see a case test 01. Right? It's not here, right, because I deleted that out of my inventory. But the asset still remains for historical reporting purposes, right?
And it's not taking a license.
Right, not using up a license. Very good point there, right? So now, before I get too crazy in what kind of devices or what kind of assets I have, let's head over to asset types. And I've used most of the built-in ones, right, that are here, right, because those are a good place to start from. Right, and I've added a few others. Right, I've added imaging devices. I've also added purchase order number. Right, I was a big stickler back when I was a customer. I used to manage my budget, and I was very big stickler on being able to pull up the information for when I needed it. All right, so when a vendor said, hey, we're going to give you a new computer at this cost, I'd be able to just pull up the old purchase order and say, well, what happened here? Why is it more than last time? All right, so I like to get that information. All right, so I have purchase order number, I've added them. Right, you can see vendor is one that's built in, location is one that's built in, device, department, cost center, those are all things that are built in. Right. So we can create additional asset types should we want to, just like purchase order. All right. Now, what we can do, right, and let's go into location here. Right, and that's not a good one to start with here. Let's go into vendor. Right. So if we go into vendor, right, by default you're only going to have the name field. Right, and that's the default field. You can't get rid of it. You can't change it. Right, what is the name of this asset? Right, so in the case of a vendor, Dell is going to be the name. Right, in case of a computer, it might be the name of the computer. In case of a printer, it might be that little label that you stick on the printer on the outside. Right, printer 01 or whatever it is going to be. Right, and then you can add as many fields as you like, down along the side. Right, so I've added things that, hey, for a vendor, this is information I'd love to be able to keep. Right, I've added fax number, the website, the main contact, phone number, contract number, and then just a big vendor notes list so that, if I want to just type in anything I want, I can just, kind of put myself some notes in there. Right, so the next time something happens, I can just check this list. And what you want to do is over here on the right, you'll see this big plus sign. This plus sign is, going to be how you add new types, right? So you'd put the field label name, right? What is the field name going to be called? Is there a default value, right? If 99% of your assets fall into a specific name and then there's like 4 that just so happen to be of a different type, put the default value in, right? And then change it if necessary. Just be careful. If you don't change it, your reporting is now bad, right? And then we have the type, all the different types, right? Attachment, currency, right? Date, right? Of a specific label in your K1, right? A link to a website or something, some other URL, a notes field, a number. Right? This is also a good point out what I was making before, right? Just like with currency, if you're going to be doing any calculations against this database, you want to make sure that you put numbers in as the number asset type. right? Because we can all type in a 93 into a text field, but it's just text. It won't actually add correctly, all right? Right? Single select, right? Just some text, right? The user, that's where the drop-down of users is coming from. And then any other assets you have, we can cross-relate them here, right? I'll show you one that I have actually cross-related, right? So I'll just, now, so what I'll do is I'll show you now an actual asset, right, as this type. So this is the asset type of vendor. So let's go over to the assets. I'm over here by the view by drop-down. I'm going to switch over to asset type, and I'm going to go to vendor. And I'm going to see that I already have a couple vendors, right? Over on the right, you'll also see this little gear icon, and then any fields you've added, you can add into the view, right? So that you can see certain pieces of information, right? On a, at a quick glance, right? So if I wanted to see something, right, just, when coming in, right, I can have all that information showing right here. Right? I can adjust everything as necessary, right? Maybe I don't need to see the unique ID because that doesn't really bother me. I don't really need to see that. But you can see here I've added Dell. Right now I'll click into Dell. Right, and you can see here's all the fields that I need. Right, very basic ones. Here's a website link, right, that I've added, and I can always come in here and click on it. It'll open up, that website. So thinking about the printer, it's a good option. Now let's go back to our asset types, and let's take a look at purchase order number. Right, and what I've done on purchase order number is I've added two different assets to it. Right, the vendor that I purchased it from, the cost center that I've purchased it from as well. All right, because in my world, at least in the education space, right, a purchase order can only come from one cost center. Right? Business administrators can do some funny things to make that change, but in 99.9% of cases, right, one line in the budget is paying for this specific purchase order. Right? Now, the items in that order might be going to multiple different departments, but the purchase order itself came from this cost center, right? The vendor, right, I'm going to be issuing it to one vendor, so it can only have one vendor. I'm going to be pulling both of those from the assets fields so that when we looked over at my list of vendors, we saw that there was Dell, KACE, and Quest, right? I don't want to have to type that in every time. Right? So I added that in as asset type of vendor. You'll see this down below here, right? Asset type of vendor, right? So now let's go ahead and take a look at my purchase orders. All right? So let's say I'm going to create a new purchase order. I'm going to go to my view by drop down up top here, go to asset type of purchase order number. Right? And you'll see I've created 5 purchase orders, and the name is the number of the purchase order. Right? And I started with 0001. Obviously, you can do whatever you need to do. All right, but let's go ahead and just create a new one. Right? So the new purchase order I'm creating, right, is going to be 0006. The vendor, right, here's my little drop-down list. It's being pulled from that list of vendors I've already created. So I can go ahead and click on Dell here. All right? Now, what cost center is it being pulled from, right? And you can make in whatever the cost center numbers are in your environment. Right? We had different, lines for all the different budget numbers and so on. I just made up some numbers here. All right, I'll just put it into 401. All right, and we have a date here. What date was this, issued, or what was the purchase date, or so on. Okay, and I'll just click on Save. All right, it'll bring you back to this page. You'll see here's my new purchase order, right? Vendor that was purchased under, and the cost center, right? Now, here's where things get more interesting. Now, let's say I want to see all the purchase order numbers that I've sent to Dell. Now, I could come to this page, but after a certain time, there might be thousands of purchase orders or hundreds. That's going to be kind of hard to look at. So what I can do is I can come up here to View By, and you'll see, let's go to the asset type of vendor again. And let's actually click into Dell this time. And what I'll do is I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see related assets. And for anything that I have added the asset vendor drop-down list and chosen Dell, here are all the purchase order numbers that I've issued to them. All right. And again, you can also pull this information out through reporting as well. All right. looks like we got, oh, okay, just a big thank you from John there. All right, so we've got, information there, that you can pull and, right, it's all related. Right, so I can go on a vendor, I can see all the different asset types. I can click into a purchase order, right, and I can see if I went into my devices, right, on my device assets, asset type, I went in, I added asset purchase order number. And then when I went into a device asset, I added the purchase order number to that device. So I can go down and see on purchase order 001, these are the three things that were purchased on that purchase order number. Right? Relatable assets. Okay? So instead of having to constantly create a custom dropdown with all your vendors or a custom dropdown with all of your purchase order numbers, right, which we're constantly adding new things to, right? So it would be no fun to maintain a list of those things. We can relate them using the asset types that we create, right, that we're generating the lists as the dropdown is opened. Right? And I can also cross-link into it, right? So I'm going to click onto R2D2, right, to see what it is. Now, the last piece I wanted to show is location. And I'm going to go to asset types of location. And you'll see, I want to go to assets. I want to start asset types of location. And just show you that right now I only have the name, right, and then parent location. All right? So from a top-down perspective, right, a city is in a state, right? A building is in a city, a floor is in a building, and a room is in a floor, right? So there's a top-down philosophy, right? A parent to child there, right? So I've added parent location, okay? And that is of the parent asset type. So now if I go to assets, and this is one nice thing, we add department location and cost center are things that we'll add to the asset type dropdown because they're things that you'll quickly go and take a look at. Right, and if I go to location, you'll see I kind of have this little kind of hierarchy view of all my locations. And you'll see under California, I've got California Mountain View, and down here, California Santa Clara. Now, Mountain View, I've broken up. I've got Office 1, Office 2, and Office 3. Now, under Office 1, I've gone through and I've broken up. We've got Floor 1 and Floor 2. And then under Floor 1, I have 2 different rooms. Now, you can go a little crazier than this and create a really big list. Right. But what I can do is remember I was mentioning before, right? I want to see everything that's on the Mountain View room 101. Okay, well, I've got this device in Mountain View room 101. All right. Well, maybe I want to see what's on room 102. Well, I can see that this one device is in room 102. Well, maybe I actually wanted to see what was on floor 1. Right, that will include both rooms, right? So we can see here's, it's showing me what are the related asset types here, right? Now, this is just showing me the related assets, but if I went back to my main assets list, and I looked on view by, and I went by location, and I said, let me look by floor 1, there's my 2 assets. Well, let me go actually take a look and see what's in Mountain View. That would include all 3 offices. Well, now we've got multiple different items here, and you can see what office they're coming from, right? Well, let me just go location. Let me just go to all of California. All right, you can see, well, there's a couple things in the Santa Clara offices. All right, so relating them parent to child like this allows me to select and go through and see them in a more hierarchical view. So that way I want to see everything in a specific room, a specific floor, a specific building, a specific region of our company, build out all of those things. Right? And again, you can report based on this as well. All right. Okay. So I think that's probably good. John, anything to add?
No, that was perfect because that illustrated everything that you had spoken about on a conceptual level before. So
excellent.
That's perfect.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. So any other questions before we do wrap up today? I don't see anything coming in through here. I don't see anything coming in through Q&A. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for stopping by. I'd like to thank you for staying with us through our technical difficulties in the beginning there. Big thank you to everyone there. Mike, do not forget to send me that email address and your company name and so on, and we'll get started with that conversation. Otherwise, I want to hope everyone will come to, we've got an open forum this Thursday. We've got our asset management life cycle next week, which will expand on what we're doing here and start working with more, how do we really manage an asset from the minute we purchase it to the day it gets into the building, to goes out onto the table, back into the spare room, then we recycle it, and then it's out the door. Right? How do we kind of manage it through that life cycle, right? So we'll be doing that on Tuesday next week. So hope to see everyone there. Hope you have a good week. Until then, have a good day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a good